and continuing to work on our party's sorcerer, Dazan. So last time we did all of the flesh tones as well as the inside of the cloak. I think the cloak turned out pretty well. The flesh tones, it's hard to see on this background, but I'm pretty happy with them as well, especially once we block in colors. It's going to look great. And we're going to start to offset that green on the inside of the cloak with a red on the outside of the cloak, as well as brown on the pants and orange on the shirt. So the big thing about all of these colors is they all are red toned, so they should sit really well off of that green. And out of all of the miniatures for this party that we've painted so far, this one is going to be the one that has most likely the more bright colors, while I generally try to save those for more colorful characters like bards. This character with the materials and so many different layers, I think it's really going to work well. And the brown, just starting with a deep brown, and then the cloak. This looks bright here. This looks very bright red. You would almost think Christmas with the green and red. But I guarantee when we start doing the highlights, it's going to tone down a lot. If you're painting miniatures and curious about how the colors are going to look next to each other, or when you're laying them down, have a couple of miniatures that you can just put some paint over the primer so you can see how they look when you do layering and highlighting and shadowing. And you'll see as I'm painting this, when I reload the brush, I leave a little bit of space in between where I'm painting, and that's because the edges are going to dry before I bring the brush back, and I don't want to peel paint away or have any type of a break in the paint. So there's little bits of gray you can see on the arm there. That's just to make sure that when I do connect the two blotches of paint, they're nice and even. And again, with the green, this is going to start looking like Christmas. Once we do all the highlighting, it'll look much better. Red is the direct opposite of green, so it's a great contrast in colors. Red with green actually helps both of the colors really pop off of each other really well. I initially was going to go for purple, but because we did the same with Matroth, the rogue, I wanted to avoid it. Again, because we're using these on the table and not in competition, I want to have them very unique and different. I want the players to be able to spot these miniatures really easily, even if they're sitting down across the table. I want them to be able to identify their miniature and where they're at just by a quick glance at the table. So putting on the red, this is just a thin red layer. This is called Carnage Red. It's a Reaper paint. A fantastic flow consistency. You'll see here I go in where it's dried out and connect those two paints and make sure I get all of the areas on the exterior of the robe. Try to get the edges along the cloak really well. And again, as we go through and highlight, this red is going to look deeper. You can see where it's dried. It already looks like a duller, a deeper red than when it was first applied. Sometimes you have to push past those first fears. When you start laying down paint, you think it may be a wreck. You have to push through and get to the next few stages so you can see what it's like when it's layered in, when you've done highlights and shadows. And this is going to be the shadow color. So the deepest folds will all stay this red color, and then we'll highlight up from here. And I'm just using a Reaper Triad for the highlights. It's not going to be anything too complicated. Just a triad that I'll blend. And that way we get good transitions. Nothing that'll stand out too much. And just like the inner cloak, it'll look a little silkier. So it's not just going to be a flat color. And that'll highlight the sculptor's work that they put into the miniature. With all the folds and the dynamic movement in the fabric, we want to just highlight what the sculptor has created in the miniature. With the red done, we can go back now. The pants are dry, of course. Start highlighting up to a chestnut color. This is just a blend of the muddy brown and chestnut, which both have more red properties in them than some other browns. And again, I want that red color, that red effect. Even though it's brown, it's a muted color. It'll stand off really well from that green. It'll contrast that green, so we don't have to worry about anything like lines. We don't have to put in black lines to differentiate the colors. The contrast in the paint will give good separation, just so our eyes can tell where one fabric ends and the next begins. Contrast is super important for that factor. And of course this video is sped up so it doesn't take as long. I am not painting this fast. The video is just sped up so that we can get through this at a good timely manner. And here we're starting to put orange on the tunic or the shirt. And this is going to take a few layers because this orange is pretty thin and the gray really shows through pretty hard. So it'll take a couple of layers of this orange, and I'm going to treat it just like the red. Start with the deepest orange I'm going to use, and then we'll highlight up from there. And I'm not putting it on the bottom yet. You see I give it some time there. And that's just so the brown pants have plenty of time to dry. It's easier to paint over rather than paint away. And you can already see the browns are standing out quite a bit from the green. The orange, where the green inner is, it's kind of a line in there, so it separates the orange from the red. Not bad. Now we've got to give it a bit to dry, go back to it, and everything is pretty well dried, so we can continue highlighting up and putting some paint on this miniature. And as I said, this here is going to be some of the more chestnut color, so it's going to get more red in tone than the muddy brown. And for those highlights, this sculpt actually, you can see as we highlight it up, the legs are extremely muscular through these pants. It's kind of funny because as a sorcerer or a magic user, a wizard, even a warlock, this miniature has such buff legs. You can tell this guy never misses leg day when he is working out. But it gives a lot of good, interesting flow to the fabric, so we have to highlight up those muscle areas where the light would catch it. And doing an additional layer of the orange. Again, this is a thin paint, so it's going to take just a little bit more just to get that good coverage. And because we've moved off of the primary pants, now we can start looking at doing the lower level. So Dazan, as the sorcerer, continues to look at how he can increase his both control of the arcane through practice, but also on his path. He is looking for a portal to his home world. The game world that we're playing in is not his home world. So part of his backstory questing is looking for a portal that will lead him to his home world. And it works really well because I built in different types of portals into the gaming area. And part of those are going to be explored through the regular gameplay. So it gave a good reason for him to join the party and continue visiting the locations that they're going to be going to, because he has information on where some possible portals to his home planar. So it's a good opportunity for him to, one, have some good lore on the world to share with the other party members of, oh, there's a portal here and we need to explore it, as well as gives him a good reason to continue putting up with the shenanigans of the rest of the party because they're going in the same direction. And it's better to have more people to carry on this adventuring than just himself going to try to explore these portals. So here, just another coat of the same red. And again, just for good opacity, we want to make sure that none of that primer shows through. This is the base for that whole cloak or robe. So we've got to make sure we've got good opacity, that we can build up the highlights onto it. And here you can really start seeing some of the sculpted details in the folds and the fabric. This has a lot of depth to it. So highlighting up is going to be super important, just to make sure that when it's under normal light, you can see all that detail. But just continuing on, a good carnage red coat. Make sure that we've got great coverage. We don't have any of that primer showing through in the cloak. And while I'm painting this, I'm also starting to think of other colors for other accessories. So you can see he's got the belt with a buckle. He's got a pouch on the side with a book in it. He's got a small pouch on the opposite side for like coins. There's actually some ruffly stuff in the neck area that has a medallion under his beard. Then, of course, the back of his belt, his hair. He's got a headband on. And again, the last time I painted this was very 70s-esque. This one I'm thinking about with the headband, I keep thinking of Daniel LaRusso. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to incorporate anything Karate Kid into it or not, but I may try just for fun, because part of painting is seeing where that inspiration takes you and making it your own, making it different, making it unique for whether you're displaying it or, as I am, giving it to a player as a gift. And just back in a little bit more of the orange. Again, good opacity is super important for these highlighting. You've got to make sure you've got that primer covered. That way you've got a good solid base to highlight up from, and your color flows better as you're blending from the shadow color to the base color. I usually have one transition color in between, a blend of the two. Sometimes more, but generally just one. If you don't have good opacity, even your blended transition color is not going to sit right on the color if you don't have a good solid foundation. So make sure you cover that primer up, get good opacity with the paint. And here you can see we're starting to lay in the next highlight color, because we're leaving the crevices. The deepest crevices are going to stay that carnage red. You'll see when this dries, while it's wet, it may look very similar to the carnage red, but this is actually a blend. And that way we can start highlighting up. And for Dazan, the newest member of the party, there's still a lot of backstory that he has that is yet to be unfolded. The search for the portals is kind of the biggest piece of it. But as the party goes through and explores the areas that contain the portals, it's going to be interesting to see then how Dazan kind of interacts with the creatures who are inhabiting the places that the portals hold. And once he has access to the portal, is he going to attempt to get the party to adventure beyond the portal or continue with the main quest? Now, because I do collaborative storytelling, everything is going to circle back, but the players have great agency in my games to just follow whatever paths they lead and see what happens in the main story arc based on either their presence or absence. So it's going to be interesting to see how Dazan starts confronting some of the portals. In the first portal that the party has kind of chanced upon, they haven't really explored it very much. Some of it is going to be coming in game session updates that I send out. But once they find out that they're basically sitting on top of a portal, it'll be interesting to see if they want to do any exploration into it. And as we just continue to paint, highlighting up, because of the flowiness of this robe, and because this is one of the blend colors, it's kind of hard to see much of the difference yet. You can see where we did the lower cloak for sure. Very similar because we use that base color, that shadow color, and then we're just starting to lighten it up towards the midtone. And the final bits of this darkest orange will go on. This will set the stage for highlighting. And I know this video is a long one. Some of these are where we've got quite a bit of painting to do. If you put this on in the background while you're at work or just kind of hanging out and spending some time watching some miniatures get paint, I hope you enjoy. And if you have any questions, of course, pop them down below. I will be happy to answer any questions. If you have any type of interest in miniature painting, stay tuned. We're going to have some announcements on that coming soon. But if you are interested in miniature painting, drop a comment as well. Let me know. We're getting ready for the Bones 5 Kickstarter to start shipping. So on some of our other videos and social medias, we're going to be doing lots of miniature stuff. And here you can see this is the next lighter shade. We're doing smaller and smaller bits, thinking about where would the light hit this robe. So smaller and smaller areas that are getting highlighter colors. This is what's going to push those shadow colors, that deepest red, further back. You can see already how much deeper that red looks from when we first put it on. It is not that bright Christmas red like it looked initially. Already by starting to put in some of the lighter red highlights in small areas, that deeper red is starting to really show through. And that'll continue as we push up these highlights into brighter and brighter colors. You'll see the shadow colors just continue to sink in and become more and more of a muted red and a deep red. So it's a great kind of color theory that you discover while you're painting miniatures, or painting for that matter, any type of painting. When you're working with different colors and color theory, highlighting and shading, just some of the little tips you pick up and things you find out, mostly through doing, but also through workshopping and just sharing tips and hints. And this one here, I can tell you, went through a number of stages where I was still considering, do I need to change up this red? Because the biggest fear is I don't want this to be a Christmas mini. It is not the season for it. It is summer as we're playing in this campaign. So constantly check it out. Make sure I try to keep these as muted and deep as possible. Make sure it doesn't clash with the red and look Christmassy to the green. Continue to highlight, continue working through it. Smaller and smaller areas getting brighter and brighter in paint color. And again, you want to really think about where would the light hit the fabric. Because this is sculpted detail in here, you can even look at it from above if your light source is above the miniature and really see where you should be highlighting. And as we put this paint on, again, you're seeing that red just get deeper and deeper into the shadows. such a great effect. I love seeing that happen. And of course this is going faster because we do have it sped up. It's really good. And in the next video we'll start tackling some of the other details to really kind of bring that gray further and further kind of as a history and not a current color on this miniature. We'll focus a lot to frame in the face where there's no black lining. It kind of looks like a blob in this video because those highlight and shadow details, one, they're so small, but there's also nothing really framing that face. So we'll have to think about colors for hair, as well as some of the decorative things around it. The headband, there's a bit of a band in the beard as well. And this robe here definitely took quite a bit of time. That's why this video is as long as it is, even sped up. But one, it's got just so much detail, and I really wanted to do a good service on the miniature. Now we can start working on highlighting some of the oranges. And same process, this is just a blend from the shadow color to the mid-tone. And we'll just highlight smaller and smaller areas where the light would be hitting it. And I'm painting over some of the details here on the beard and the medallion, just because I can go back through. Those details will be painted over this orange, but it allows me to keep just better brush control and move those colors really well. And back to more reds. You can see here again smaller and smaller areas that are getting highlighted colors. Lighter and lighter in red tone. And really thinking about where those light sources, where the sun is going to be hitting this character. Which for Dazan isn't like too out of the ordinary. He's actually been raised in an area of the world called the Shadowlands, but it isn't a dark and gloomy place by any means. It just, there are some things around there that has given it that name. So the Shadowlands are not just a nasty, gray, dreary place that never sees the light of day. So he's used to seeing sunlight. And that's why some of these brighter colors work so well for this character. And of course basing it all off of the green inner cloak, which we did just because that's the player's favorite color of green. We wanted to have that kind of be central focused and then build out from that. So contrasting that green with the brown, the orange, the red work real well. You can see here on the upper sleeve now where I start using more of the lighter tones to call out and highlight the different folds in the fabric. Should start seeing those little bits better and better on the camera. Even though they have good natural shading from the sculpt, the paint definitely helps just draw your eye to those variances. A lot of great detail in that sculpt. And colors are working well together so far. Again, just pushing through. Here's lighter tones on the orange. Just highlights. Continuing to get some dynamic lighting going. And after Dazan, I've only got one more miniature in this adventuring party to paint. It's kind of surreal that I've spent this much time recording these miniatures being painted out of all of the miniatures I've painted for one party. It's kind of surreal to me, but it's going to be interesting once I do the photography for the final video that we do and we put all of them together. And now that we're able to meet up as groups, I don't know if I'll actually have them all. So I'm going to be photographing them separately and then splicing it all together in a video in the finale video of our miniature mastery videos. It's going to be interesting to see all of them kind of next to each other in the video, or moving from one to the next. But I'm really looking forward to these guys getting onto the table and all together as an adventuring party, as well as getting them into the hands of the players. So that's always my favorite thing when the players receive their miniature. Just seeing them take the time to appreciate, note some of the details, tell me what they like and don't like. That feedback is super important so I can continue to grow, continue to push the boundaries a little bit and think about how to make my miniatures look better each and every time. This guy, I think the clothing is coming out really good. I'm really happy with it. I can't wait to pick it up next week and do another one.